Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Giridhari. Vallabha Giridhari. Gopijana Vallabha Giridhari. Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana. Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Vishnupada Ramhamsa Paradikacharya Stotra Stotra Shri Srimad Divangas A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Gantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Nitai Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All praise to Srila Prabhupada. Rayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaivam Narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Madiraye Nashtapaishu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. Reading from Gantara Srimad Bhagavatam, 9th Canto, Chapter 16, Text 24. Svadeham jamadagnistu labdva samjnana lakshanam rishinam mandale sobhut saptamo rama pujitaha. Svadeham jamadagnistu labdva samjnana lakshanam rishinam mandale sobhut saptamo rama pujita. Svadeham jamadagnistu Labdva samgyana lakshanam Rishinam mandale sobhu Saptamo Rama pujitaha. Please chant. Swadeham jamadagnistu Samgyana lakshanam Shine mandale sobhu Swadeham jamadagnistu Labdva samgyana lakshanam Rishinam mandale sobhu Saptamo Rama bhujita Swadeham jamadagnistu Sabva lakshanam Rishinam mandale sobhu Saptamo Rama pujitaha Svadeham, his own body, Jamadagni, the great sage Jamadagni, two, but, Labdva, regaining, Samgyana Lakshanam, showing full symptoms of life, knowledge and remembrance. Rishinam, of the great rishis. Mandale, in the group of 7 stars. Saha, he, Jamadagni. Abhut, later became. Saptamaha, the 7th. Rama, Pujita, because of being worshipped by Lord Parasurama. Translation, purport by His Divine Grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Thus, Jamadagni, being worshipped by Lord Parasurama, was brought back to life with full remembrance, and he became one of the 7 sages in the group of 7 stars. Purport. The 7 stars revolving around the pole star at the zenith are called Saptarshi Mandala. On these 7 stars, which form the topmost part of our planetary system, reside 7 sages, Kashyapa, Atri, Vasishta, Vishwamitra, Gautama, Jamadagni, and Bharadvaja. These 7 stars are seen every night, and they each make a complete orbit around the pole star within 24 hours. Along with these 7 stars, all the other stars also orbit from east to west. The upper portion of the universe is called the north, and the lower portion is called the south. Even in our ordinary dealings while studying a map, we regard the upper portion of the map as north. Om Gyantimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Panchakopa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Vishnu Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimad Romapad Swami Nityananda Namo Vishnu Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Gaura Bhai Prachari Nirvishisha Shunyavadi Pashita Adishtai. Hare Krishna. So, I find this verse to be a nice meditation on one of the foundational principles of Krishna consciousness, that we're all not the body. So this is a nice story that helps solidify this conception of life. Lord Parasurama is bringing his father Jamadagni back to life after he was killed. He said, Lord Parasurama, Jamadagni was killed by the sons of Kartavir Arjuna, and then Lord Parasurama went on a rampage, and he went and killed all the Kshatriyas of the world 21 times. And then afterwards he did a sacrifice where he brought his father back to life after being killed. He must have been gone for a while if he went around the earth 21 times. But still, this is the power of Vedic culture and the powers of spiritual life, is that he was able to bring his father back to life by the sacrifice that he performed by worshipping Vasudeva, it said in the previous verse. So this is a deep, powerful meditation, understanding that this is actually real, that this is possible, that we don't see now in Kali Yuga that people have the ability to bring people back to life. But it's there in the previous ages when the Brahminical culture was more intact. And so it's a nice meditation on just the basic principle that Srila Prabhupada preached over and over again. He's saying, you're not the body, you're not the body. It's the foundation, it's the first teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. And for me, in my personal life, in the beginning of where I'm at in Krishna consciousness, it's like I have to constantly go back to this foundational principle, this essential principle of my actual position as a soul, as a spirit. And this is the foundation of spiritual life, that we're all spiritual beings. And this is what allows us to keep practicing Krishna consciousness. We don't give up hope in the process because we understand it thoroughly, that the foundation, it's not blind faith in some sectarian religion. It's Sanatan Dharma. It's the eternal nature of our souls. It's our eternal position. We're reviving through the process of Krishna consciousness. So it's not just some fanatical religion as most people see it as in the modern context. And we have to firmly establish that within ourselves through deep contemplation on the foundational principles. So this verse and this story, I'm just kind of sharing where, from my level of realization, there's many different levels of that we could speak about on this pastime, but I find even just this basic principle is profound to me, that all these things are going on, and then Lord Parasurama in this verse brings his father back to life. So this proves and this shows a whole different conception of life, that this is possible. So this person had left his body for quite some time, and then through a performance of sacrifice, he was brought back into his body. And then it's described that he became one of the 7 sages in the higher planetary systems after this. So that is also profound. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada describes how the 7 stars are revolving around the pole star, which is known as Dhruva Loka, where Dhruva Maharaj resides. And it's described that along with these 7 stars, all the planetary systems are revolving around the pole star. And this is described in the 5th chapter of the, or 5th canto of the Bhagavatam, the whole structure of the universe. So, besides meditating and knowing that we're not the body, through reading the Bhagavatam, we also get a clear conception of the structure of the entire universe. And in this purport, it's explaining just a little bit of that from the 5th canto, of how these 7 planets, stars, are revolving around the pole star. I was reading an article because I was preparing to give a class at a university, and I was going to speak about consciousness, how we are conscious. One second. I was going to speak about how we are consciousness, or we're spirit. And so I looked up some articles from the university about consciousness, and I was pretty surprised about one of the articles I was reading by a professor at Harvard University describing consciousness. So basically, he was saying that consciousness is just a product of the mind. That it's just, they see it like this, that we evolved from matter, and over millions of years we've come from somehow, like, some organisms developed from the water of the ocean, and they gradually over millions and millions of years evolved into living entities, and then after millions and millions of years after that, they somehow formed human form of life. And in that human form of life, we have this thing called the mind. And so then, only when this form of life came about, then consciousness came about. So then now they're all like just trying to study this conception of consciousness. How did we become conscious? It's like we just evolved from these organisms, and now we're conscious of our existence, and it's all a product of the mind. And so he was going on to explain that this is the scientists are very excited about this, that they find that they're onto something cutting edge. They're studying this consciousness which was never before studied, and they think that religion or belief in the soul is just like the easy way to understand things, but they want to really understand how it came about. They don't realize, at least most of them don't realize, that the Vedas are much more clearly explaining everything, and it's a whole different conception of reality when you start reading the Srimad Bhagavatam compared to what these scientists believe in. And Srila Prabhupada, he would oftentimes in his purports and in his lectures be speaking against the scientists, because they shape the thought of society. They're basically, the scientists and the universities, the philosophers, are like the brahmanas of the Western culture. They're putting forward the conceptions of life. So and the main ideology is evolution, like what I was speaking about, how we evolved from molecules, and then this is just this one life. Somehow we're conscious, we have minds, and we've evolved, and we just have this one life to experience this reality, and that's it. And then after this one life, that was our only shot to exist forever. And so this is their conception, and they don't believe in the soul. They just believe somehow we're like the mind and this consciousness. It's very confusing to understand where is their conception of themselves, and it doesn't really match up with their lifestyle, because I'm sure they have families and they care about other people, and they have qualities of the soul, qualities of the self, but then they just explain it in terms of scientific knowledge of the mind and the consciousness. It's really theoretical and philosophical. And also, another thing that shapes the modern conceptions of life is Christianity. They also don't have a very clear conception of reality. They don't believe, most Christians, modern Christians, they don't believe in reincarnation. So this verse would be blasphemy. It'd be totally fanatical that someone came back to life. This coming back to life is the foundation of their belief in Jesus. That the concept is that Jesus was raised from the dead. So that's the same thing. Jamadagni right now is being raised from the dead. And this happens quite a bit in the Bhagavatam, a few different times. But the foundation is that Jesus, it's the proof that Jesus conquered death, is that he was raised from the dead. And a lot of the things that they claim Jesus' godhood is like common mystical powers from the Vedic conception. They say that he walked on water, he produced bread. All these things are like common mystical powers that a yogi can develop. So it's not so common in Kali Yuga like we see, so it seems like, oh, he's definitely the son of God because he walked on water. But when we read the Vedas, we understand the mystic powers that are possible. It's not so uncommon. That's not to say that Jesus wasn't a powerful spiritual teacher. I think it's pretty profound that people still believe in God because of him, and they have a monotheistic idea of the absolute truth. And some forms of bhakti also are within Christianity. He taught love of God and treating people with love. So it's powerful conceptions of life. I'm not trying to smash Christianity, but I'm just going over the misconceptions, comparing it to the Bhagavatam, wherein reincarnation and mystical powers are a common ground. So we have the Bhagavatam, and we get to see all through in this. The Bhagavatam is like story form, and it's easy to read, and it transforms our consciousness onto the spiritual platform. Just by reading this story, it creates an impression, a deep impression in our mind of the spiritual conception of life that most people don't have access to. Just hearing a story that this incarnation of God killed all these people, and then his father died and he brought his father back to life. It's a nice story, it's pretty exciting, but subtly it has an effect on how we see life. And that's what all the stories of the Bhagavatam, it's really easy to read, and it totally transforms our consciousness and brings us to the spiritual platform. And it's, I think, one of the first verses in the Bhagavatam, part of it is say, the purpose is to establish reality from illusion for the welfare of all. So just by reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, reading these stories, it's very profound. It uplifts us from all these misconceptions. It doesn't, most of the other conceptions don't make any sense. It's not very logical to the Christian thought that there is no such thing as reincarnation. So their conception, according to their conception, just observing myself, I would have only come into existence like 23 years ago. And before that, forever, I didn't exist. So it's just this one life, and then you have this one life to surrender and accept Jesus as the Son of God. And if you don't do that, then you got to go down to the place of suffering forever. So that's like the modern conception in general, that you're just born into this one life on this one planet. I don't think they have much conception of life on other planets. If you went to a church and spoke about life on other planets, you might get kicked out or something like that. If you start reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, might put yourself in an awkward situation. But their conception is that you just have this one life to accept Jesus as the Son of God. But the concept of the Bhagavad Gita is that the verse Parichanaya sadhunam vinasaya chaduskritam dharma samstha pranartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Krishna comes every yuge, every millennium. He comes himself, or he sends his messengers. It's just repeatedly. He's sending either his incarnations or Shakti Avesha avatars. It's just a constant thing that Krishna is trying to send his messengers to uplift the conditioned souls. It's not just one person came 2,000 years ago in the Middle East and died for our sins, and if you don't accept him, then you don't have a chance to go back. No, it's for eternity. Krishna sends his representatives, or he comes himself again and again to uplift the fallen souls, the conditioned souls. So it's more of a logical understanding than the idea that there's only one Savior and you have to accept him. It doesn't actually make any sense, because if you are born in a place where there's not this specific religion, and you're born and you live your whole life and you die and you don't ever or hear about Jesus, then that was it. You just had that one life, and there's no such thing as reincarnation. So you didn't accept Jesus because you didn't hear about him. So what do you do? But this conception of the Bhagavad Gita, starting with this foundation that we're all eternal souls, and that we transmigrate, just like the body, we change from boyhood to youth to old age. The soul similarly passes into another body at death. And then we do this until we take to the process of Krishna consciousness, bhakti yoga. We get till we get the mercy of the devotees, so we take up somehow the practice of bhakti yoga and connect back with Krishna. So it's a really universal principle. I've been teaching at yoga studio, and I've been kind of teaching along the lines of yoga, just like the concept of yoga connecting with the Supreme. That's what the word yoga means, is to connect back with the Supreme. And Bhakti Yoga is just the easiest way to do that. We're chanting the names of God, and we're reading the stories of God. And we do that with love. And Krishna says that in the 6th chapter, that one who worships him with love is the best of all yogis. So it's a very universal teaching, that we're just trying to connect back with God, with our Supreme Creator, with our Source, through loving devotion. And so although we're firmly, somehow we have to, although being firmly fixed in our lineage, in our practice, in our institution, we have to also know how to present it on this universal level that transcends all borders and barriers. So then we can share it with everyone, and it can be natural. And that's the truth of the matter of Krishna consciousness. It is transcendental to religion and specific rituals or things like that. It's the nature of the soul is to be connected with God, with love, in loving devotion. So we get this conception from reading these stories of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and yeah, it's amazing. It's really amazing that we get to read the Bhagavatam and read the Bhagavad Gita and try to somehow share it with other people and bring people out of this darkness. There's so many misconceptions of life that cause all this difficulty. People don't know, they don't have access to this knowledge that the world is a place of suffering. So they're just in it. They're just absorbed in the material world, and it's like surprising to them. Like I've been talking to my father on the phone, and he's been talking to me about all this. Every time we talk, he talks about like the mass shootings that have been happening, and it's like it's continuously like surprising to him. It's like, I can't believe that this is happening. I can't believe it. It's like this, it's like that, and then the next thing happens. I can't believe it's happening. It's like this, it's like that, and it's just like repeatedly. But if you have the conception, that's what the material world is, a place of suffering. It's like, it's described in the Bhagavad Gita as the place of death. And the point is not to find our happiness here. The point is to take shelter of Krishna and go back to where we actually belong. So if we're invested in that, then it's not so surprising. It's like, yeah, another person is gotten, killed. There's like, it's just what happens in the material world. It's like, it's not like something to joke about, but it's like, it's not surprising. It's like, we hear about it. It's just the history of the world is just killing after killing after killing. This country, America, was established on killing. The Europeans came to America and killed all the Native Americans, basically, whether either specifically purposely, or they also, because they brought foreign diseases, that pretty much the entire Native Americans were wiped out. And there's still some Native Americans, but they reside on small little portions of land that they've been given. But it was basically formed, America was formed on that, and killing the Native Americans and taking their land, and cow killing in Chicago, animal killing all over, and we're just seeing the karmic reactions. Ramapad Swami yesterday, the last few days, made nice points about how we're in Chicago and we're seeing we're in the midst of all these karmic reactions. Or when in Puerto Rico, I think it was Puerto Rico, they're in the midst of the karmic reaction of brought on by the devatas, the hurricane. But it's not that we're not experiencing the prarabdha karma, but we're in the place where everyone is experiencing the prarabdha karma, and we take every opportunity to take further shelter of Krishna and to serve Krishna. So in Chicago, there's so much prarabdha karma going on. So many people are killing each other or treating each other poorly. Everywhere, it's like anytime you step outside, there's the sirens going on, and pretty much every minute, 2 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, maybe. You might go 5 minutes without hearing a siren. But this is all just prarabdha karma, so it's not so surprising when you have a conception of spiritual life, and we have to go really deep into our chanting and our reading, and so we're not surprised when these things happen. We read about it all the time, we hear about it, and it's to be expected that there's calamities over and over again in the material world. So I find practicing Krishna consciousness in Chicago is somehow quite favorable, because it's so rough, the situation outside is not so peaceful, so it forces me to take more and more shelter of Krishna consciousness. So I guess that's the benediction of living in Chicago, that it's not so peaceful, so it forces you to take shelter of Krishna and take shelter of devotee association and take shelter of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So those are some of my thoughts on today's verse. If you have any comments, questions, yeah, it's working now, yeah.
Krishna Prabhu, thank you for your class. I have a comment and question, so forgive me for not organizing my thoughts, but you were mentioning Christianity, and one of my favorite verses, I mention it all the time, and in Luke 14:11, Jesus says, for whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. And I'd like to kind of relate that to my comment and question, is that the one thing I appreciate about this verse is that devotees are not looking to be stars, they're looking to be moons. In the Gita, Krishna says, among the stars I am the moon, and also in the pastime of, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a chapter called The Appearance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, either the birth or the appearance. And within those 5 verses, it says that the devotees of the Lord are like moons. The Lord and the devotees are like moons, and other people are like stars. So the reason I appreciate that is because we've seen a pastime of Dhruva. Even though his planet is known as a pulsar, technically, he was, the reason I appreciate about that pastime is because when he was insulted by his stepmother, and his father didn't say anything, so he had desires to be an arrogant all-star by competing with his father. But when he had the association of the Lord and Narada Muni, by their association, he desires to become a modest moon. And so one thing that Lord Chaitanya says to Ramananda Roy, he says, Shreya Maide Kona Shreya Jiveta Hoisar, Krishna Bhakta Sangha Vin Shreya Nahi Ar. That what is the most auspicious thing in the world? And Ramananda Roy says the most auspicious thing is Krishna Bhakta Sangha Vina, association with devotees, because they teach one how to be modest moons. So my question is that even though, let's say for example, the prostitute in the pastime of Haridas Thakur became purified, Ramachandra Khan didn't, or in the pastime Prahlad, Hiranyakashipu didn't become purified by association with Prahlad. So what is the meaning of association? How come some people get purified from this desire of egotism and some don't? They have the same association. So maybe you could explain some of that according to your realizations? Or, I mean, that's one question I always have. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
So your question is, you mentioned the importance of association with devotees, and then you mentioned that Hiranyakashipu wasn't purified by his association with Prahlad, and you mentioned the pastime of Haridas Thakur, and he purified the prostitute who associated. I guess my understanding is that the attitude makes the major difference. Like, if you have the proper attitude when you associate with senior devotees or Vaishnavas, then it makes a big difference on what you receive. It's like, the more intimately you associate with them. So I guess associating, we can look at what it means to associate. It doesn't necessarily mean just being in the presence of a person, just like being in the same room as them. But there's association means that there's like some exchange between the people, and there's some sort of like intimate relationship that develops, where you discuss, or you have some sort of personal, intimate connection with the Vaishnava, and that's when that's the really what I see as like association with the devotees. From my experience, like, I serve my spiritual master, but most of the time I'm like too spaced out to actually associate with him. I'm not ready, I'm not qualified to actually associate with him. He's mercifully giving me his association, but most of the time I'm not ready for his association. Like, really, how much he can give, I'm not ready to take or to accept through his association, because I still have purification to go through. If that makes sense, it's like I'm not ready, I'm not open enough. So when someone gets to be in the proximity of a pure devotee, you might not be open enough to actually receive the gift. So that's what it takes. Anything else?
I was wondering, did you study elaborately about the term in purport, zenith?
The what?
Zenith is written how the pole star, or how the Saptarshi Mandals, they move from east to west.
Have I studied it?
Yeah, did you research what is zenith in the?
Oh, zenith. Do you know what the word zenith means? The peak.
Yeah, that means I was just saying that something in the space, they mark as a point, astronomers, just like plum type, you say.
Yeah, I haven't studied it too much. I've read the 5th canto, but even just reading it is just one time is not enough to understand. It's really profound. One thing that I find is interesting is in modern astrology, or in modern context, they call it the pole star, they call it the North Star. So the North Star, it's always fixed in the one position, and they use that. We've been using that to understand the directions that we've been going. So it's interesting how it lines up with that, with the pole star conception, that everything is revolving around the pole star, and all these stars and all these planetary systems are revolving around this pole star, which is at the top. And so the Bhagavatam, we get to hear this pastime of Dhruva Maharaj approaching the Lord, getting the mercy of Narada Muni. Then he gets to go to this star, the pole star, where he engages in worshiping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then my whole life been hearing about this North Star, but we don't really know anything about it. With the Bhagavatam, it perfectly lines up even with our perception, the pratyaksha, direct perception. We can perceive the North Star with our direct perception, barely, but it lines up with the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam is Shabda Praman, so it's the best way of knowing things as they are. So yeah, it's all in the 5th canto. I'm not conversant with it though. Maybe someday.
Thank you for your answer. It was made everything pretty clear, and it reminded me of a pastime in Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita. The first pastime I can't reference this, unfortunately I can't find it, but the second one I can. There was a Mataji Prabhupada disciple, and she said, I want to be closer to Prabhupada, like have his association more, because it's practically impossible. And she gained a realization on her own, by Krishna's mercy, that she realized that association, you used the word proximity, and in this pastime, that word was used also. She realized that association doesn't mean physical proximity. It means getting serious about your Krishna consciousness, your humility. Now, the other pastime I can reference, I marked it down, and you could look it up. It was the temple president of the Paris temple at the time in the 70s. Now, he never met Prabhupada before because some devotees were initiated through the mail. So this was his first time meeting Prabhupada after being initiated. So for whatever reason, Prabhupada was given a Bhagavatam class, and the temple president came in late for whatever reason. And it was a full class, of course, it's Prabhupada. So he came in late with another devotee. And after he came in like a Sunday feast class, he bypassed all the devotees, walked all the way to the front, and sat right next to Prabhupada. And he said at that moment, Prabhupada gave me my first instruction. He said the instruction was, he didn't even look at me the whole time. And he felt humbled by that I bypassed all the devotees. I was very proud to be the temple president. And so that's one thing I appreciate about the physical proximity. Association doesn't mean proximity. So anyway, Hare Krishna, thank you.
Yeah, it's more about aligning ourselves with the spiritual master's mood and mission, and trying to surrender to the mission. That what does he want? What does the spiritual master want, and how does he want it done? So how we have to get closer to the spiritual master means to get closer to his desire and following and carrying out his desire. And yeah. Thank you. Kantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki Tag Gora Premanande Hari Hari Bo.